more you can learn about this business and talk with people, man, the more you're going to succeed. And I tell guys that all the time. It's like, man, keep asking questions, keep learning how you're going to do this, because that's going to help you make better decisions for your company and hopefully more profit.
Welcome to the Oakley Podcast, Trucking, Business, and Family. This show is brought to you by Oakley Trucking, headquartered in North Little Rock, Arkansas. The purpose of this podcast is to communicate with Oakley owner-operators and their families by giving them up-to-date information concerning Oakley trucking and the trucking industry, from business advice to safety updates to success stories. Also to give an insight to outside truck drivers that might be interested in joining the Oakley family. Hi, this is Jeremy Kellet, Director of Recruiting here at Oakley Trucking, and I'm your host for this podcast. This is episode 32. On today's episode, we're going to talk to Jared Flinn, operating partner at Bulkloads.com. Now, Jared is a highly proven and accomplished entrepreneur in the agriculture and bulk commodity industry. He's got experience as a driver, a dispatcher, and a logistics manager. So we're going to talk to Jared Flinn about the dry bulk industry. I want to cover things like what's the outlook on freight in the future here for the dry bulk industry. I want to talk about what it is. You know, there's a lot of people that don't know what dry bulk is and like to explain some of that a little bit too, and get his history, learn a little bit about Jared Flinn and what he does, and also promote his podcast. So we'll get with him in just a minute, but first I'd like to thank you guys for listening to this podcast. It's I'm getting some good feedback from you. Really do appreciate it. I want to make sure this podcast is for owner-operators and their families, and we are putting stuff out there that helps you be successful. That's the plan with this podcast, and we want to keep doing that. So if you've got things you want to know about, you want to hear about, you want to learn about Oakley, let me know, and I'll be glad to put it together and get a podcast out there to you. It comes out every Wednesday. We email a link to you. Actually, Corey Huey will email a link to all our owner-operators, and if you want to get on that list, let us know and we can email it to you, but you should be able to find it, on YouTube. We're putting it out there on YouTube. Also, we're catching up with the episodes where I think next week or two, they should be all of them on YouTube. So that's something that we're doing new, but, appreciate y'all listening. Share it with everybody and spread the word, because this is how we want to communicate with you owner-operators and your families. So before we get started with Jared, let's listen to Vickie Chastain on this week's Need to Know segment.
With winter approaching, it is important to implement safety skills for driving on icy conditions. Winter driving, that's this week's Need to Know segment. Slow down. Most accidents occur because drivers don't adjust their speed according to the road conditions. Give yourself some extra space. The stopping distance is twice the normal distance on wet roads and almost 10 times more on icy roads. Pay attention to the tire spray. A good way to assess the road condition is to observe the water coming off the tires of vehicles around you. These winter driving tips might appear simple, but they will only work if you follow them carefully. Stay safe. I'm Vickie Chastain, and that's this week's Need to Know segment.
Okay, let's get started with Jared Flinn. We're going to visit with him a little bit today and talk about the dry bulk industry. You on the phone with me, Jared?
Yeah, Jeremy, thanks for having me on.
You bet, man. Glad to have you on. I know it's been a couple of months. You let me come on your podcast, and then I'm a little slow on getting you on ours, but I appreciate you being patient and glad to have you.
Absolutely.
What's going on give us a little bit of history. I told a little bit about you just a second ago about you being an entrepreneur and in the agriculture and bulk commodity industry, and you were even a driver, dispatcher, and logistics manager. Yep. I mean, you got a full circle there, though. Give us a little history on yourself, if you don't care.
Yeah, actually, it's ironic. I was just talking to our Bulkloads team this morning and telling them just a little about a history of kind of where I was to today, and some of the steps that I've taken along the way that's had a big impact. But yeah, right out of school, I started driving a truck commercially. I had actually had my CDL, and I grew up as a farm kid in eastern Missouri. Grew up on a 240-acre farm and knew how to drive, trucks and tractors and all that. And I guess the little kid in me, I've always loved, just operating big equipment and machinery. But, right out of school, started driving a truck for a little bit, delivering material, and it was more on the construction side, but just kind of learned the ins and outs of what really makes, stuff move from point A to point B. And it sounds pretty simple, and people think, it's just a simple process. You pick up a load here and deliver here, but there's just so much more that goes on in the process, and so many variables that can happen. But did that and got promoted to work inside the office as a dispatcher and dispatching the trucks. So kind of learned that side of the table where, when you're a dispatcher, you're trying to help coordinate the shipments with your drivers, but then also with your customers on the other side. So really trying to have that balance of making both things work there. And then along the way, I started doing just sales as well within the office. But fast forward a little bit about that, I went from there to working for a large grain company in Kansas City, Bartlett Grain. And that's really kind of where I guess, got my feet wet, learning the bulk ag industry in general, but even more on the trucking side. And I was telling my group here just earlier today, it's like, man, I just had a thirst to learn so much about it, because I saw, a lot of people don't realize, especially in the grain industry, when I first started at Bartlett, the vice president of the company said, "Hey, Jared, just so you know, we're a transportation company that moves grain." And I was like, "What? No, wait, we're a grain commodity company." But what he was saying is, your freight, in a certain sense, is really dictated on kind of what moves that happen in the market, and where grain moves and all that. It's so crucial on the freight, whether it be in, rail, or truck or barge, vessel, any of that sort. So I really just kind of started studying, like, why does this work? Why does, corn move this way, or why does rock move this way? Why does sand move this way? And understanding kind of why those logistics work. And really on the other side too, like what really, what drivers need, to make it work on their end, and kind of how all that works together.
Well, it's interesting.
I had a great run.
It's interesting where if you're driving the truck, you're curious about that stuff. Now, why am I doing this? Where's this going to go? Why am I taking it from point A to point B when I know they have it over here somewhere closer? It goes through your mind like that, and you're always trying to figure it out. I think a lot of drivers try to do that, and they're interested in what the whole process of the bulk commodity. I know I am too.
Yeah. Well, and I think, we have to, for a certain extent, if we're going to continue to grow and succeed with whatever we're doing, you got to understand kind of how the processes work and how to make them better and make them more efficient. So I guess that's where I really, when I was there, I was like, I want to learn this so I can be, the best of the best when it comes to that. So, but yeah, and then I just, I saw that there was a need in our industry. Technology was already evolving with mobile devices and the internet, but I saw that there was just a need to really do that in a larger scale, and that's where Bulkloads was started from there. Just really seeing that, man, there you could use technology to help assist the supply chain and help drivers, shippers and brokers all interact better online. And that's kind of where Bulkloads started. And started from ground zero and just really just kind of use some of my expertise along the way to put that into that system. And then, that's kind of where we are today with Bulkloads. We essentially help, shipping companies that have product to move, commodities, find those, trucking companies, and then also brokerages. And then, along the way, you guys have signed up with us and been very, very valuable members since.
Yeah, it's a great tool to use for us to see everybody come together. There's not a lot of websites out there that do that. I'm sure you got some competition, but I know you guys do a great website, and a lot of business goes through you every year. So I know that's it helps us. We use it occasionally too. There's no doubt about it, because it connects those shippers. It makes it easier for them, to find companies that have trucks, I'm sure. So, and that also gives you, I bet that gives you a real insight of what the freight is doing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. You really get to see flows and trends and depending on who's calling you that day, you can really judge kind of what the market's doing. At this time of the year, obviously we're in the fall months. So you're going to see trucks starting to tighten up, especially on the grain side, and more shippers on there looking for those trucks. So, and then also you can just see your load counts or volumes go up just because of the tight capacity. One thing I was also going to mention, Jeremy, over the years, guys have told me, it's like, man, we love Bulkloads for the fact that you can, connect and find loads on there. But one guy told me one time, he goes, and since then there's been more social media and more guys are on social media platforms. He goes, Jared, I realize now it's like I can communicate, with another bulk hauler, in New Jersey or Arizona or California that I never knew otherwise. And I can talk to them about, what's going on in their side of the world, and, how things are relating, as far as loads and rates and all that. And that was just rewarding for me to hear. It's like, wow, we've created these tools for these guys to actually connect with each other and talk and learn. And I say this all the time, and it sounds very generic, but the more the more you can learn about this business and talk with people, man, the more you're going to succeed. And I tell guys that all the time. It's like, man, keep asking questions, keep learning how you're going to do this, because that's going to help you make better decisions for your company and hopefully more profits.
So the dry bulk industry, I know most of our listeners know what we mean when we say dry bulk, but as a recruiter, we get calls every day of guys wanting to lease on to Oakley Trucking, and they don't know what dry bulk means. They don't understand. So, you dumb it down for me, Jared, on some commodities on the dry bulk industry, maybe even some examples of where this stuff starts, goes, and ends up, if you got any of that. And I got a little bit of that too, but we, just to educate our listeners, I sure know you. I sure can tell just by talking to you in the first few minutes, you've definitely got some experience and know what you're talking about. But I think if we'll educate everybody on what dry bulk is, some commodities, and where they go, would help tremendously, if you don't care.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I speak to people, especially not even involved in trucking, when I say I do dry bulk, that still doesn't mean a lot. But what I really try to explain, when you think about dry bulk, a lot of times it's your raw product or raw commodities that need to be shipped. We're not, it's not finished or packaged goods. The commodities that we're moving, they're not going to be on a pallet or in a box or even in a big tote. Most times it's going to be loaded in a big, whether it's a tanker trailer, pneumatic trailer, or even in a liquid format, or other dry bulk trailers. Obviously the hopper bottom trailers or in-dump trailers or walking floor trailers. And that's really the bulk of what encompasses the bulk industry. And so I always tell people, when you think of on the ag side, think of all your grains getting hauled, from either from the farm or an elevator to a feed mill or terminal or feedlot or end user. And those are the commodities that we're hauling. When you're thinking of industrial, think about your different sands and aggregates, even scrap metals, plastics, anything that's going to get just loaded in a bulk type container or trailer. That's the bulk industry that we represent.
Yeah, I think it's actually a niche in the trucking industry that a lot of people don't realize, because when we explain dump trailer and then we tell them we run all 48 all over the country, they're like, well, that's a dump trailer. You're not hauling rock, sand, gravel, construction stuff. And we're like, no, we do a lot more than that. It's something that a lot of people don't realize when they see a dump trailer. It may be going from coast to coast. You never know. I mean, we haul, most of the stuff is regional, but that commodities, petroleum coke, alloy, scrap metal, granules, sand, it all, tire chips, stuff goes all over the country, and it's a great little niche in the market that I think we have, and there's more of it than what you would think. When you get involved in it, like me and you're involved in it every day, there's a bunch of it, and we think everybody knows about it, but really, honestly, they don't. The majority of the trucking world, I think, is, your van, reefer, and flatbed industry.
Yep. Well, and I think what makes ours very unique, Jeremy, is that when you think about bulk that gets moved across the U.S., one thing that's very different about our truck versus other modes of freight that are out there is a little bit even on the competitiveness of other freight modes to move it. One thing I learned, and this was just experience I learned when I was even at Bartlett Grain, one thing railroads and even barges and vessels, they try to focus on moving more than anything are your bulk commodities, your dry and liquid bulk commodities. And there's a couple reasons why, because most of your commodities, they can get loaded very easily and quickly and unloaded very easily and quickly, which just makes it that much more favorable for a railroad to move, versus a truck, versus moving like lumber or cars or some of these other things that get moved, on the rail. So it almost changes the flows a little bit in our industry. So most of your railroads, they want to load, 110 car units. They call it a shuttle train. Usually, they have an incentive to load them in, 16 hours, I think, if I remember right. And the same with getting them hauled and unloaded down there. So it almost makes it a little more competitive on the bulk side to get into that market. So a lot of times, and not always, and there's a specialties that you all deal with and that we even see on Bulkloads, but you're not going to typically see grain move like corn real far before it's going to be more efficient to haul it on rail. However, though, you're going to see some of your specialty commodities, maybe organics or stuff like that. That's going to get moved more by truck versus rail. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize. They're like, why don't you see grain move? Why don't you see corn move from Missouri out to California like you do with this and that? And it's like, well, it's just the economics are different. And when you're with the railroads, they're going to try to compete more on that stuff, versus the finished commodities. And like I said, a railroad can they can load one rail car, which is I think equivalent maybe to 4 truckloads, or you'll see them move one dry van load with a box on there. So which is going to work out better for them overall.
Or a barge.
That's another thing that just
or a barge.
Yeah,
it's got 60 loads on it, so to get it down there.
Yep.
Okay.
And I always try to explain to carriers too, because like, man, why can't I make this money doing this and that? And I go, man, it has nothing to do with you. It's just the economics. Like most shipping companies are trying to figure out the most efficient way to get their freight moved, and if they can get it moved, by a barge or rail, more affordable than truck, that's just going to pick. It has nothing to do with the carrier. It's
Right.
it's the economics to make their business thrive. And if they're not doing that, their competitors doing that, and they're gonna push that other one out. So it's just a simple math.
Right. Just to remind our listeners, we're talking to Jared Flinn with Bulkloads.com, a guy that is an expert in the dry bulk industry, getting a little bit of information from him so we can educate our listeners on dry bulk. And I think it's a really good topic, and we spend a lot of time explaining it in the recruiting department for sure. And I know a lot of guys that live it. It's not a big deal to them, but man, I tell you, it goes a long way when you understand the logistics of it. When even from the whether it's from the field to the barge to the to another country, it's neat to understand how bulk commodity operates. Are you seeing any new commodities that you're hauling more of, or that you're seeing shipped more of than you used to? Anything new out there that I know I didn't put that on our list to talk about, but I was just thinking of this.
It's a great question. It's interesting just the way you see some of this stuff cycle in and out. Early on, even 5 years ago, we saw such a huge surge of the fracking industry going on. So we saw so much sand, frac sand, getting moved through our service and site. But then again, as that industry two things happened. As that industry kind of evolved, rail got involved in it more, and they figured out more lanes. So you'd see more of your longer hauls getting moved by rail, and still your short hauls getting moved by truck. And then even recently, that's kind of changed. But that industry kind of took a dive. Yeah. It's recovering a little bit, but even today, you're just not seeing near the volumes of truck. You'll still see it on a local basis, but not. At one time we'd see loads from Wisconsin loading sand going all the way out to Denver, Colorado.
Oh, it was really crazy when it was happening. It was absolutely crazy. You couldn't find.
Yeah, I mean, I remember talking to guys at one time, man. It was. I mean, not to throw specific numbers, but $4.25 per mile, on some of these loads. Just because there was just such high demand at that time. So that was one. Today we don't see that as much anymore. Another one, the whole ethanol market's really changed. I think currently more and more of these plants, they're getting back online. But, when corn prices I should say even gas prices took a dive, ethanol wasn't the demand for it really went down just because it couldn't compete with gasoline. So, at one time we saw so many DDGs, distillers grain byproduct from the ethanol plants, getting moved further distance, and so that's kind of scoped in. So it really, man, every year it just changes. It evolves different. I would say you say maybe some upticks. I mentioned earlier, organics is still a new market that people are trying to figure out. The flow of that. So we are seeing probably a lot of specialty on that. Another one that we're seeing. I mean, we're just now starting to see a rise on it, but through this whole COVID deal, the pet food industry has just went off the charts. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you saw this, Jeremy, now with COVID, there's a shortage of pets out there. People are buying, they're talking the price of puppies are 50% year over year, because people are at home, they're wanting, they're wanting more pets that they can take care of at home. Well, what's that do for the demand on dog and cat food and all those? It goes through the roof. So we're seeing that really pick up. Now it's a crazy $1 billion industry.
That is a crazy industry. I mean, that has exploded. When you go, I've got a dog, me and my wife got a dog and an outside cat. And when you go buy that food, I didn't realize she was spending $50 for a bag of dog food. Well, I'm like, wait a minute here. But,
I'm just as guilty. Growing up, man, we fed Walmart Olroy dog food.
Yeah.
$8, a 50-pound bag. And then today though, because dogs got allergies and all that, we're paying $85 for a 35-pound bag of dog food. But the thing is, we just people have evolved around now. More pets, from even 20, 30 years ago they're truly family members in the family, so they're taken care of that way. So that's just another one that we've seen. The pet food industry, we see so much more of those commodities that get moved, all over the United States, because now people they don't even want not just grain free now, but now they want organic.
Yeah, and that's food, regulated
food for their dogs.
Yeah, that is really regulated too, where they're very particular.
Yep.
On that. That's something that you really got to pay attention to when it comes to contaminations in that part, because they're serious about that. But you're right, it's exploded to where there's a lot of freight out there that goes to the pet food industry. It's up and coming. I didn't realize it. I knew it was growing, but you make a lot of sense with the COVID-19. Everybody at home now, they need a friend because they don't have their coworkers anymore, except on Zoom. So they're needing a dog or something to talk to. So. One of the hard things that we have to overcome as in the dry bulk industry and hauling it basically is the consistency of having it year round. And I tell everybody when we recruit them, I said, look, we are going to keep you busy year round. Everybody, when you mention agriculture, dry bulk stuff, they think, well, it's just, seasonal. Am I gonna be busy in the winter? And that's something we have to really convince them. A lot of people, look, we're going to keep you busy year round. There's a lot of commodities out there that move all year round. And there's a lot of people that store these grains and stuff all year round and then ship them at different times. So it's what's your take on it being year round consistency?
It comes and goes, and I can even go back to when I was a shipper. I'd have carriers that would call and be like, "Man, I want to haul for you all year round." And this is just as a shipping company. And I said, "Man, I wish I could promise that to you, but there are some seasonalities that happen in the industry." So some of the advice that I always gave along the way, and then I still give the guys today, talking about consistency, it's like, man, always be planning, 5 steps forward, just so if something's going to, and this, Jeremy, like there can be sometimes you're on a run that like, this run, it's going to be, 200 loads for the next, month or whatever. And then all of a sudden next week, customer, they had a breakdown or they can't use it anymore. So then all of a sudden that just throws that completely, out of the bag, and you got to figure something else. And I've had so many guys that even carriers, I talk to, and they're like, man, I'm busy. And then all of a sudden the next week they're calling. It's like, man, I need some work, So that is a challenge that's just challenge in trucking, I think, in general, is just having consistency of work. But yeah, I think there are some seasonalities in agriculture that really kind of change those dynamics. I guess my advice for that would be, besides just planning ahead, like, as a carrier, just really kind of, look to see kind of, where you're based out of, what kind of lanes move in that area, how you can, kind of adapt and change. And I think, and I'm sure you guys run multiple equipment, there are times where some equipment is more demanded than other equipment, just in general freight overall, typically, your bulk stuff slows down, a little bit in your winter months. And even in your kind of spring months, but on the flip side, once you get into spring, your construction and, building materials and all that, landscaping, rock and all that starts, picking up. So that's a good time to start looking at more of that type of freight. Obviously your fall type, you got harvest going on. So I think it's just like really trying to understand like what times of the year do you see more of your peak seasons? We have guys that I know, on our side that they're very diversified. They, when bulk is running hot, they run bulk, but they also have other equipment, trailers that when flatbed's running hot, they switch over to that. So they're constantly, they're not just subject to whatever the market's going to throw at them.
Right. We've been real fortunate here to have, there's so many different bulk commodities that we're able to keep guys busy all year long, hauling bulk commodities. And it's amazing to me that we can do it. But it, when you get into all these other stuff that you learn about that can be shipped across the United States, I mean, whether it's granules or coke or alloys or scrap metal, I mean, that stuff has no season to it. That's just a year-round stuff that keeps us busy. And even the plastic pellets and the PVC powder, I mean, that stuff is just, it don't stop. It goes a lot more with the economy, I think, than it does any type of season stuff. And it, right now it's exploding. I'm sure you're seeing it on your end too, but man, freight is just really good right now. It's exploding, and which is good. I hope it continues to do that, and we have a great year next year. Before we go, tell us about your podcast you're doing and kind of what you do on it and who you get on there, and kind of just, advertise it a little bit to our listeners and let them go and check out your podcast.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you letting me talk about it. Yeah, we started, we just call it the Bulkloads Podcast. If you want to look up in the App Store, it's even on our website, for basically anywhere that podcasts are listened to or downloaded, you can find us. But yeah, the Bulkloads Podcast, we started it 2.5 years ago. I think now it's kind of what we're reaching, but we really wanted to, we have Bulkloads. We wanted to really kind of put a voice behind the business and really talk about bulk freight trucking in general. I know you guys do that now too, but we really wanted to be the pioneer to really talk about, our industry in general and what happens in there. There's obviously there's lots of other different trucking podcasts that you can listen to as well. But yeah, as far as content that we bring on there, we really try to break it up, and we have some strategy. We try to, anything that's going to, and I mean this is all sincerity, anything that we can do to bring value to our subscriber base or anybody listen to learn more about the bulk freight industry, we see that as a win. So we bring everything from insurance companies on there, talking to them. We talk to different equipment, trailer manufacturers, truck manufacturers. We even bring on, we do company spotlights. We'll bring on different members on our website, whether it's a brokerage business or a shipping company, or even a larger fleet, and just kind of let them know the stories behind them and how they started. The cool thing I love about this business, Jeremy, and in general, like, man, we all have a story, but man, the more you talk to these people, like a lot of us, man, we all come from the same spot. I'm a good old country boy, and man, I think a lot of the people I talk to every day, they're kind of the same background. And I guess that's overall. And man, I'd love to end with that. I love this industry. I love being able to talk to the people I talk to every day. I hate to say it selfishly, but it's just good cultured, good, honest boys that, that want to work hard and serve people and get the job done.
I couldn't put it any better. That's great right there way to end it, because I think the same thing. I feel like I'm like these people. We're all on the same page and all on the same level. And it's great to be able to work in the dry bulk industry. And Jared, I appreciate you coming on our podcast and giving your perspective on the dry bulk industry. I sure admire your perspective and your history and what you've done in the dry bulk industry. And I tell you what, I really am glad you come over here and tell us a little bit more about it and educate our listeners a little bit. And thanks for coming on. I hope to stay in touch with you, and we talk again pretty soon. And appreciate all you listeners out there tuning in to the Oakley Podcast. And if you got any questions for us, let us know. If you need to get in touch with Jared Flinn over at Bulkloads.com, let me know. But hey, check out his podcast. It's really good. I've listened to a couple of episodes, several actually, and got some great guys that you interview, and it's really good podcast. So appreciate everybody listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Oakley Podcast, Trucking, Business, and Family. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate or review the show in the podcast platform of your choice and share it with a friend. We love hearing from our audience, so if you've got a question, comment, or just want to say hello, head over to our website, theoakleypodcast.com, and click the Leave a Comment button. We'll get you a response soon and may even share some of the best ones here on the show. We'll be back with a fresh episode very soon. Thanks for listening.